So, this happened last week.
India's largest airline by size and market share, IndiGo, has placed its first ever order for wide-body planes. The airline, which operates a huge fleet of narrow-body planes, has ordered 30 Airbus A350 aircraft, giving a further fillip to its international expansion.
That's right. India's behemoth carrier, which just recently became the world's third largest airline by market cap, is now entering an even bigger league with its latest order for larger aircraft meant to operate on long-haul international routes. Now, IndiGo, a textbook no-frills carrier, has virtually controlled the Indian aviation market for the last decade. With rival budget airlines SpiceJet and Go First controlling small additional chunks, the structure of the Indian market has been such that the typical flyer too had been for the longest time a budget flyer, used to buying meals in all-economy flights and benefiting from sporadic discounted sales all year round. Post-COVID, however, that has changed. The Indian air passenger now wants luxury while flying. Demand for business class seats has surged. People are taking off to exotic vacations in the West much more often than they used to. SpiceJet has shrunk. Go First is barely surviving. Air India is drawing up plans to become a formidable global full-service airline. Now, IndiGo's order has to be seen as its latest and most significant step in its gradual transformation from a budget airline to a hybrid between an LCC and a premium carrier. And that could really completely transform the Indian aviation market. IndiGo currently operates about 350 narrow-bodied Airbus A320 planes and ATR turboprop aircraft. The airline has 1,000 more narrow bodies on order. Buying the wide-bodied Airbus A350 means many things for the airline: a wider international reach, a different product, using the domestic hubs it has built over years as a funnel to take big clusters of passengers abroad, especially the rapidly growing tribe of wealthy Indians who love to splurge on premium travel. But for IndiGo, it also means high costs of ownership, tough competition from global premium carriers, and long gestation periods before its new long-haul routes operated by the A350 turn profitable. So, the question is, how will IndiGo fare in its new avatar? For answers, listen on. It's Thursday, the 9th of May. I'm your host Anirban Chaudhary, and this is the Morning Brief. IndiGo's plans to buy bigger planes have been long brewing. Here's my colleague and ET's Aviator-in-Chief Arindam Majumdar remembering a conversation he had years ago with IndiGo's former president Aditya Ghosh.
It was 2017. If I remember, I bumped into Mr. Aditya Ghosh once somewhere and I asked him, at that time it was a buzz whether IndiGo would go to London or not. So I asked him about London plans and he said that we are ruling wherever we are. We don't need London. London needs us. So that was that was one thing. And then I think again the buzz came that they are examining to go into the A330 new, and they seriously did at some point of time in 2018 when financial situation of Jet Airways was getting strained. IndiGo had anticipated that Jet would need an investment in 1 year line. And they really intended to buy it, provided all things fall into place. And that was one more intention that they wanted to get in this long-haul international travel. Followed up by that interest in buying Air India's international business, which ultimately did not fall in place. So that willingness to go from domestic superiority to long-haul has always been there. It's just the time and tide, and it fixes rightly now. So IndiGo has been planning out for 7 to 8 years now, and finally they took this leap.
So at the initial buzz of IndiGo buying bigger planes, which happened a few years back, its stock had actually tanked. But the latest announcement of the aircraft purchase made its share prices soar to intraday highs. What's the difference? What happened in between?
Number one is primarily Jet Airways going out. It's a large competition of international business, and remember, Jet was a formidable competitor even till his last days in international business.
For
Domestic,
sure.
they might have declined, but in international, Jet was better than many of the best in the world. In that case, of course, there was a competition, and the market was not very confident that Indigo can command a fair share of traffic from Jet. At that point of time, Air India was also there, although not at its healthiest stage, but of course, it had a fair share of international traffic rights and all. As compared to now, Jet Airways has gone away from the skies. Air India, of course, the market believes that it's in a mode of restructuring and it would take a long time for them to get back their house into shape. So they also believe that this is the time to examine and go into the next stage of growth frontier. Like, if not now, then when? You can do things wrong and get back there and correct it in this period of time till the time there is a formidable competition coming out again.
Now, Indigo has always flown the 180-odd-seater single-aisle Airbus A320 aircraft. The Airbus A350, on the other hand, is a twin-aisle plane which can seat over 350 people in a single-class configuration. It's one of Airbus's most prized products and a rival to Boeing's very popular 787, which Air India flies. I asked Arindam how Indigo selected the A350 after mulling over several other aircraft makes.
One thing that struck me is 330 was a natural fit to Indigo's product line. But 330 hasn't been a good seller in the market. I think in a few years down the line, Airbus will kill that product or only retain a 330 freighter. Somehow or the other, the airline did not like that product. I think when you go into wide body, like those days if I remember pre-COVID, when low-cost carriers were going long haul, 330 suited perfectly. But this low-cost long-haul product, I think, has not been a very successful venture. If you see even Wow Air, it tried and died. AirAsia X is not the best example in terms of success.
Absolutely.
AirAsia did
Absolutely.
beautifully, but AirAsia X hasn't gone anywhere. I think Indigo took that lesson very well, that whenever you go beyond that 7, 8, 9 hours, the human body demands a different product. So why not differentiate there? And when you differentiate there, why not have a product which is accessible, which can make other geographies too accessible? Why get stuck only to Europe? The 321 XLR, don't forget, will come into Indigo's fleet starting 2025. And if the deadline is correct as of now, that will also open up many European markets for it, in which it can go the LCC way of having 200 odd passengers in the aircraft. But when you cross that magic mark, it's a different product that Indigo needs. One thing that I learned was that A330 was not out of consideration completely, but in the Gulf, the 330's engines have given some headache to the airlines. And after Pratt & Whitney, Indigo is very conscious of engine issues. Mind you, the Gulf and Indian conditions are very similar, hot, kind of dusty. So the Pratt & Whitney engines, which does well in West, it performs miserably in Indian conditions. I think not going with 330 Neo, this reason played a bigger part. And the third is, of course, staying with the Airbus product. It gives commonality. The other choice could have been 787, but the cost and the restructuring of operations that would have required Indigo to get a different line of product into its fleet, I think management did not want to walk that line.
How do you think Indigo will configure these aircraft?
The CEO was squeezed a lot of time today about the configuration. He did not give out anything, but the 350's arrival say that they are going to a dual, or if things change, to a triple configuration with the premium economy. But a dual cabin is a forgiven, may not be a very heavy business class like Air India has, but a limited business class. And even for the economy, going beyond this buy on board philosophy and having a catered meal, having hot meals, it would be a proper premium product. May not be as premium as if you compare to the likes of Kingfisher or Vistara, but it's never going to be a single class buy on board product.
So this is the transformation of Indigo from a textbook low-cost airline to a hybrid between an LCC and a premium airline.
Look at the things that Indigo is doing. They're playing around with their onboard food product. It hasn't reached the finality, and I'm sure the team will think a lot before to modify what it has now. Or see this recent announcement where Indigo is going to test an in-flight entertainment product on his Delhi-Goa flight, and hiring of the management also. IndiGo has a lot of people working on their loyalty product now. So this metamorphosis into a hybrid has already started, and even for the narrow body product, they are seriously considering a dual class cabin, and instead of a 3-3 configuration into a 2-2 configuration with at least 4 rows of seats. So what changed is that I think, again, that we should go back to that phase, plus 60% market share in domestic market, multiple routes, over 100 routes where IndiGo is unavoidable. They're the only carrier there. And also this mega growth of Indian economy, where there are wealth creators, these MSME, SME owners with a spending power beyond the geography of Delhi, Bombay. I was reading that day that a city like Patna sold around 40 Lamborghinis. Can you imagine that? This is where IndiGo believes that if we are present everywhere, why let off that section of people which will, in the absence of a product, is going to Vistara or Air India, to our competitors? Why to give up that fair share of traffic? Why not use our strength and capture that also? So that's where that concept of going from an all low-cost single-class configuration to a dual cabin and hybrid comes from.
And IndiGo has been making top management changes too, bringing in executives from across the globe, something that would make its ambitions very clear to anyone.
Greatest signal is Peter Elbers. I think the selection of Elbers was kind of given, saying that that we want to be a global example. In management, yes, there's an executive who is working on the IndiGo loyalty program, who used to lead the jet privilege program at some point of time. And 2 days back, IndiGo announced an ex-Volotea executive. It's a Spanish airline who will be coming as chief transformation officer. And then there are a few people working in commercial also who has come from, I think it's KLM, or should be Peter's former team, who are working on building this capability of GDS. Right now, IndiGo is not present on any GDS platform where international booking can be done. But once you go into that international business, you have to behave like a proper full service carrier. So these kind of changes are happening, and we'll see more of that in future.
Now, IndiGo's pivot comes at a time when, like I said, the demand for long-haul travel is rapidly growing. But Indian carriers' fleet capacity to cater to that demand is woefully inadequate, and therein lies huge potential. I asked Kapil Kaul, CEO and director of consultancy firm Kappa India and one of the foremost voices on Indian aviation.
Okay, Anirban, one thing we must start by recognizing that India is the market of the 21st century. We have been saying it for a while. If you look at the domestic, regional, international, long haul, ultra long haul, there is a decades of potential ahead of us. If you talk about long haul and ultra long haul, out of 21 million passengers, that is the market for long haul and ultra long haul. Indian carriers take only 4 million. As of now, also, there is a huge market for Indian carriers. And going forward, this market would go double or more than double. And there is tremendous opportunities. And I think Indian carriers must take advantage of it. If they don't take advantage of this in the next 5-7 years, I don't think they can ever take advantage of this. So that's starting point for me. Earlier, frankly, I think we didn't have well-capitalized airlines. IndiGo was the only well-capitalized airline, which had a balance sheet, product, brand, cash, extra. But with the acquisition of Air India by Tata's, I think we have now two principal players with a balance sheet, cash, and a long-term view. So I think potential is now for the Indian carriers to materialize. There is a market. There is an opportunity, and these airlines have a determination and a long-term view. So I think in some ways we're at a critical inflection point.
I'm just referring to this recent press conference where Peter Elbers said that India is really underrepresented as far as wide-body planes are concerned. And you referred to it in your first answer, of course, how we are just a fraction of the long-haul market. How do you read his statement?
I think it's appropriate. If you look at the size of India's wide-body market to the United States, for example, we did recently a CAPA advisory briefing on wide-body opportunities in India. India has about 60 wide-bodies market for Delhi, United States, to India to United States. You need about 60 aircrafts that's currently being deployed. And Air India is deploying about 15, and they have increased from 10 to 15. So they're doing their bit, and I see more of Air India's long haul to North America. Overall, I think if you look at India's market, the deployment currently, direct and indirect, is 130 to 140 wide-body aircraft, out of which Indian carriers only do 40. And that has also increased because of Air India. So I think we are extremely underrepresented in the wide body market. And in the last 15 years, the capacity to long and ultra long haul by Indian carriers has stagnated. There's no growth. I can't think of any market with this kind of potential to have a stagnated long haul market as far as Indian carriers is concerned. So I think he's right.
How will IndiGo's reach expand with the A350s?
So I think it depends upon the business model. It depends upon the aircraft configuration, and I think closer to date we will get to know what are they planning. But I think 350s, 900s, according to me, could go up to parts of East Coast, whole of Europe, Australia. But if you go to take a long haul, to take a high density network, high density seat configuration, I think it may have limitations, perhaps to Europe and Australia. But I don't see this 350 order just an order of 350 900s. It could be possibly, and I underline possibly, a 350,000s as well. But one doesn't really know what they are planning. And once we get to know, then we can comment on that.
For the Indian customer, an Indian carrier that's the market leader and that controls 60% domestic market share, that undergoing a transformation, going into semi-hybrid or semi-premium mode. How do you think that will change the market in terms of product, in terms of pricing? What lies ahead for the Indian consumer?
So if you look at IndiGo has already made adjustments to their network and to the configuration of the 321 Neos. If you see the domestic, they operate 321 Neos with 232-seater configuration. And when they go international, it's about 220 so that they give more legroom to the passengers. Even the in-flight product is significantly different from what the in-flight product is in the domestic. So they have kept making adjustments.
Right.
One also hears, and this was reported in Economic Times only, that they would be introducing a business class or equivalent to business class in the domestic. And that would mean, even if it is on a limited network, that itself means that IndiGo is fastly hybridizing. As for wide body is concerned, and as you know, the wide body means that the length of haul is going to be perhaps 8-10 hours plus and possibly beyond. So I think the product, the service model will undergo a transformation. That's for sure. I mean, you can't go to long haul and ultra long haul with a single class configuration with limited meal service. So the entire business model would go through some transformation on the distribution side, the way the network is planned, the product, brand, the service model. That will go through a transformation. But I'm glad that they have 2 years, 3 years of time. And during these 2-3 years, they would prep up well. Because I must say that when you go to long haul and ultra long haul, even though India has a huge market, I think it can be profitable on a sustained basis to do long haul and ultra long haul. But it's extremely competitive. The capital cost of acquiring a wide body fleet, the operating cost very high, the competitive environment is extremely tough. So If you prep up well, I think the chances that you will be highly successful is there.
The prep period that you referred to also would mean maybe the longest gestation period that IndiGo will ever sort of have to undergo before it makes a profit on those routes, because that's like you said, that's the most difficult. Do you think that experiment or that gestation period will also impact its overall financial performance? I mean, there will be some time before it makes losses in these routes, several years in fact.
So I think when you take a decision to go international, you have to look at your balance sheet. IndiGo is a debt-free company almost, minus the operating lease which are capitalized. As of now, it has $4 billion cash. Our view is that by the end of FY25, it will be closer to $6 billion, between $5.5 to $6 billion. They will have another record profitable year in FY25. So about $6 billion being debt-free. What do you require to make a long-haul work? Right now, you would need PDPs. I would say about $600 to $700 million of PDP shouldn't be a problem.
Let me just tell them PDPs are pre-delivery payments that you make on aircraft.
Yes.
Right.
Second is that when you do long haul, normally you take 12 to 18 months as a gestation period to break even. And given the fact that they are profitable on domestic, they're a cash machine, it shouldn't be difficult to finance the gestation period for them, which could be 1.5 to 2 years.
Right,
so I don't see a problem. But I must say, which is what I used to tell Jet Airways, and I remind most of the airlines in India, that as you refocus to international, particularly when you try to get long haul and ultra long haul, don't neglect the domestic. Jet Airways' problem was the domestic was bleeding. So even if they made modest profits or could break even on the international, overall financials got wrecked. The advice to Air India, the advice to IndiGo, particularly IndiGo, because they're a network machine as far as domestic is concerned, that as you go through this transformation, please ensure that the domestic profitability is paramount for you. You
Absolutely.
keep strengthening your domestic network. You keep strengthening the domestic profitability. If you take eye off the ball for a year or a year and a half of the domestic, it could have very serious consequences. Otherwise, if you have 50% of your operation, or sometimes more than 50% of your operation having profitability risks, then I think the whole P&L gets impacted.
No, why I ask you this question is because globally there haven't been too many successes of LCCs going long haul, say WOW Air or Norwegian or AirAsia X.
Anirban, for WOW or Norwegian to make a long haul work is very difficult because there is no home market. They're all dependent on Sixth Freedom traffic.
Right.
So the chances of they are successful are bare minimum. AirAsia has a very limited home market. And they are dependent on the narrow body feed that they get from all over ASEAN region. And then they feed it to their wide body market. So chances of success are very, very tough. India is currently at 70 million international market. And it isn't stopping there. If you go to FY35, then FY40, India will continue to grow for decades. Then you add the South Asian market to it, which we call as a proxy India market. The Bangladeshis, the Nepal, the Sri Lanka, the Maldives. That is a part of what I call an Indian market. Then you have the international flows, Australia to UK, Australia to Europe. Those are about 100 million, because you are geographically at the right location, that's a market to access. So if you compare IndiGo's attempt of making long haul successful to AirAsia X or Norwegian or WOW, these are chalk and cheese. There's no comparison. And I think Air India, IndiGo has understood that we're not in Europe or we're not in any smaller country in ASEAN. We're a giant of a country with a giant of a market. I think you need to make sure that IndiGo's success for the last 17, 18 years is focused on cost. As long as they keep focusing on cost, and I repeat again, not forget the domestic and the regional international, I don't see a problem. So for both Air India and IndiGo, I think ultra long haul and long haul are natural, logical next steps. And I would see, and I am sure that both carriers would, over the next 10, 15 years, redraw most of the traffic back to India. As a best practice, we see the third, fourth freedom carriers normally take 70, 80% of the market. So I think there's an opportunity to bring that traffic, which currently is huge if they bring that traffic back. And we're going to go for decades.
Do you see the long-haul ambitions of Air India and IndiGo and the fact that IndiGo has, over the last few years, solidified its hub-and-spoke model? In fact, it's long metamorphosed from a point-to-point carrier to a hub-and-spoke carrier, and it's built some solid hubs in India. Together, do you see them helping India realize its long-nurtured ambitions of becoming a solid international hub?
Yes, over a period of time, India could aspire to be a hub. But I think, as I have been saying for a long while, that making a hub is not an overnight process. You didn't build Dubai it took 3 decades to build Dubai. The whole Dubai Inc. was behind Dubai becoming a hub. So I think if you leave it on the Indian carriers and say that they will invest capital in wide-body aircraft and the rest of the ecosystem will stand and watch them, it isn't going to happen. As long as the central government says, I will level the playing field. Delhi government raises hands and say, I will work together with the ecosystem. And within the aviation ecosystem, starting from the airport and the rest of the ecosystem work together like you have Dubai Inc. I would like to see a Delhi Inc. I'd like to see a Bombay Inc. I'd like to see a Bangalore Inc., Hyderabad Inc. to make India hubs. If we get that, then I think over a period of next 10 years plus, I think the prospects of becoming a hub are there.
IndiGo's latest order, at least in terms of volume, is actually a fraction of its usual purchases. But it could be a giant leap, not just for the airline, but also for the Indian aviation industry. With 60% of the Indian domestic aviation market in its control, IndiGo's transformation could also change pricing, it could change consumption, travel, and traffic patterns in the country. How will Air India react to this? Also, is this IndiGo's first set of several orders for bigger aircraft? Will it be a low-cost carrier flying long-haul international with a few additional frills? or try to become a full-fledged global full-service airline? And will IndiGo's pivot, Air India's expansion, and the government's push for new airports finally make India an international hub? Let's see how many answers we get in the coming years. That's all for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by Vinayak Agarwal and sound designed by Indranil Bhattacharjee. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday to Friday on a listening platform of your choice. Thank you and have a good rest of the week. The external clip used in this episode belongs to its owner. Credits are mentioned in the description.